Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at conditional statements and loops in Python. So starting off with conditional statements. Conditional statements are used to decide whether we want to execute code based on a Boolean condition. And in Python, we use if statements to do this. So an if statement checks a Boolean condition, and if that condition is true, it runs the code contained with it. The conditional operators we looked at before, they are frequently used with if statements, and the basic syntax of an if statement is this. You write the if keyword followed by the Boolean condition and followed by a colon, and then you just write the code that you want to execute if the condition is true. As an example, over here I have x as 14 and y as 13. So the condition is x is less than y. Whenever x is less than y, this print statement will run and it will print x is less than y. So if I run this, nothing prints. This is because x is not less than y. If I make x 12, now it's less than y, the code runs. So that's a simple if statement. We can also optionally write an else keyword to specify what to do when the condition is not true. The else keyword does not take any conditions. It just runs whenever the if statement evaluates to false. So I'll take the same code as before. X is 14, y is 13. And I've written if x is less than y, print this. And now I've added another keyword else. So this will print x is greater than or equal to y. So whenever this statement evaluates to false, the else will run automatically. But if this evaluates to true, the else is ignored. If I run it like this, x is greater than or equal to y. X was not less than y, so the else statement ran. And if I make it less than y, then only the if statement will run. So that's the else statement. We can also chain together multiple conditions using logical operators. As you remember, the logical operators are and, or, not. In this case, I'm just using and. What this does is it compares x is greater than y and it checks if x is less than z. So this whole statement will only be true if x is greater than y and also x is less than z. So in this case, if I run this, x is 13, y is 12, the chained conditions evaluated to true. So this evaluated to true because x is greater than y and x is less than z. If I change x, if I make it 15. So in this case, x is still greater than y, but if I run this, x is less than z is false. So the else statement runs and this is printed out. There might also be cases where we want to have multiple if statements. For that, we can use the elif keyword, ELIF. This stands for else if. And when the first if statement evaluates to false, the next elif statement will be evaluated. And this whole process will continue until a statement evaluates to true or when we reach the else statement, which will then run regardless of whether anything was true or not. So basically, x is 13, y is 12. So for the first statement checks if x is equal to 10. If it's equal to 10, it will print this. And if it's not equal to 10, we move on to the next elif statement. So the elif statement checks if x is greater than 10. And in this case, x is greater than 10, 13 is greater than 10. So this will run and the remaining elif and else, they are ignored. They don't run at all. If I run this, x greater than 10. If I make this equal to 10, what will happen is the first if statement will evaluate to true and only that will run. If I make this 9, all right. So what happened here is x is not equal to 10. This evaluates to false. X is not greater than 10. X is not equal to y. So what happens is it just defaults to the else statement and prints x is less than 10. If I make y equal to 9 as well, it'll end at this elif statement. So that's how the priority works in if and elif statements. It evaluates each one, and whenever it encounters something that evaluates to true, it'll just stop there. But if none of these statements, if all three of these statements don't evaluate to true, then it'll just run the else statement by default. So that's basically if statements. Next up, we're going to take a look at loops. Loops are used to execute the same code multiple times. Python provides us with for loops and while loops to use. So first off, we'll take a look at for loops. And for loops are used when you want to execute code a defined number of times. Basically, if you know how many times you want your code to repeat, use a for loop. Python gives us a built-in range function, and that's often used with for loops. What the range function does is it gives us a range of numbers from 0 to n-1, where n is the number we pass to the function. To use a for loop, we assign that range to a variable, and the for loop then runs for that many iterations. So a simple example of this would be, We write the for keyword followed by the variable we want to assign the numbers to, followed by the in keyword, and then the range function. So what this range function will do is it will return numbers 0 to 4. Basically in this case n is 5, so it will return 0 to n minus 1 numbers. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I run this loop, this print statement will run 5 times, one time for each value of x. When the loop starts, x is 0. Because of the range function, it returns 0 to 4. So the first time the loop runs, it's 0. The next time it runs, it's 1. It runs then the third time, so it's 2. Fourth time is 3, and the fifth and final time, the value is the last value, which is 4. There are two keywords that we can use to add more complex decision making to loops. These are the break and the continue keywords. The break keyword breaks out of a loop immediately and the code after the loop starts executing. So if I take a look at this code, what will happen here is the loop will start, it will print the first value of x, and then when it encounters the break keyword, it will immediately stop the loop and it will print this line. So if I run this, it will just print the value of x is 0 and then the code after the for loop. Break can be combined with if to break a loop when a condition is met. This loop will break if the value of x is greater than 2. So we pass in the same range. So this will ideally, without any if statements, it would run for 5 iterations. But here we've added a condition. If x is greater than 2, just break out of the loop. So what this will do is when x is 0, and then when x is 1, and then when x is 2, this loop will run as usual. But then as soon as x becomes 3, the loop will stop and this statement won't run, and the loop will, and this statement will then run. So the value of x is 0, the value of x is 1, the value of x is 2. But after that, the if statement evaluated to true and the loop breaks. So next, if we take a look at the continue statement, it just returns the loop back to its beginning without executing the code afterwards. So if I run this code, what is happening here is when the loop starts, basically for x is 0 and x is 1, x is less than 2. So when this happens, it prints x is less than 2. And what the continue keyword does is it causes the loop to go back to the start without running this code. Finally, we're going to take a look at the while loop. So it's basically the opposite of the for loop. If you don't know how many times you want your code to repeat, you use a while loop. It repeats code as long as the provided condition is true. In this case, I've set x is equal to 0. So for the while loop, the keyword is while followed by a Boolean condition. The condition is that x is less than 5. So as long as x is less than 5, any code that is contained within the while loop, it will run continuously. So while loops are a bit dangerous because if you don't specify a condition on which they should stop, they'll just run forever. To prevent that, what I'm doing in this code is when the loop runs, I increment the value of x by 1. And what this will do is keep adding 1 to x until it equals 5. And then when it equals 5, it no longer satisfies this Boolean condition, and the while loop stops and the next value is printed out, which is outside the loop. We can also use break and continue statements inside while loops. In this case, I've defined two variables x and y. X is minus 2, y is 5. And our condition is that x should be less than 7. And we're doing the same thing, incrementing x by 1 whenever the loop runs. But I've added a statement, if x is less than 0, meaning if x is negative, we just continue. What this will do is when this code runs, it'll just move the loop back to the start without printing any of this stuff. So what happens is when x is minus 2 and when x is minus 1, its value is not printed. And then afterwards, when it becomes 0, when x becomes 0 because we keep adding 1 to it, the current value is printed. And what this statement does is when x equals y, basically when x equals 5, it prints this and breaks out of the loop. So x actually doesn't get to reach the value 7, which it would if this break statement wasn't here. So the current value is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and as soon as it reaches 5, it breaks out of the loop because x equals y, and the final value of x is 5. In the next video, I'll be making a simple calculator using Python to demonstrate all the things that we've learned so far, and I hope to see you in the next video.